know I often say this on the show, but we do love royal history. And I'm always fascinated more so by the people that, people have met the royals, perhaps on a more, informal social engagement. It's always fascinating to see how they react. I mean, we know a lot, don't we, about Princess Margaret. Certainly a girl about town, certainly knew how to enjoy herself. And then, of course, when you think about it, the people that are at the very heart of the monarchy are the people that used to be called servants, but now are called assistants, the ones I'm talking about. And possibly of recent years, the one that's created the most divide is none other than Diana's former butler. He describes himself as a rock. Other people describe it rather differently. And I've met Mr. Burrell, and he's very much a, shall we say, fame-loving character, to be kind at least. But now, which is going under the hammer, is this particular collection of notes from a person who was the butler for a long period of time to a Hollywood legend, but also to the Duke and Duchess of Windsor. Now, this is quite a story, but let me tell you the background that you won't know. As ever, let me explain. Morning, lovely to see you. Thank you so much for joining me today, as ever, and thank you for your time. As I say, royal history is fascinating, and when you think about it, people who have worked for the royals, tend to get jobs with major Hollywood stars because they like to say, my chef came from the royal kitchen or whatever. And it can be just the pastry chef, but it sells very well in Hollywood, doesn't it? It's like if you've cooked for Her Majesty the Queen on the Royal Yacht Britannia or something, you're made for life. That's the power of the monarchy. Now, way back, of course, this particular man, he decided he was going to make something of his life, came from a normal background here in the very heart of the United Kingdom. But a twist of fate changed all of that, and he ended up becoming a butler for none other than the Hollywood legend, Bing Crosby. That's right, the old grown-up Bing Crosby. Now, Bing, of course, was phenomenally successful throughout the 1930s, 40s, right through, in fact, in films until the 1962 epic Road to Hong Kong, alongside Bob Hope, Dorothy Lamour, finally, as we told you about that story, and, of course, our very own Joan Collins. But what was interesting was this. Alan Fisher had been the butler to the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, and it had not been a smooth ride. But like all good butlers, he'd kept something of a record and decided to handwrite notes to remind himself some of the incidents, some of the people that he'd met, some of the people that they'd met. He didn't particularly get on with Wallis Simpson, and this is detailed in these manuscripts, it's the best you can call it, which are now going to be under auction in a few days' time, looking to fetch quite a few thousand. Apparently the reason why he couldn't get on with Wallis Simpson was, he says in these letters, that she simply didn't love the Duke at all and treated him very badly, continuing to have dinner parties even when he was very ill. Now here's where it gets interesting, because he followed on that particular stint to go and work for the Hollywood legend Bing Crosby. And Bing Crosby was so fascinated with his story, he thought this might make a very good film, or indeed documentary. So he put Alan in touch with the bosses of 20th Century Fox. And 20th Century Fox were very keen to turn the butler and the royals into something of a mega movie. Now there was a legal problem in the fact that, of course, he'd signed even a document back then for the Duke and Duchess of Windsor. And it started to get rather nasty and explode, so much so that Bing had to pull back from this particular project. Now again, here's where it gets really interesting, because apparently Bing Crosby felt so bad with his involvement regarding this, shall we put it kindly, royal debacle. And he'd met the Duke and Duchess of Windsor himself, got on apparently very well with the Duke, not so much with the Duchess. There's a pattern roaming here, isn't there? So he pulled well back. Now, way back in 1977, that's right, Bing Crosby gave his very final concerts at the world-famous London Palladium. So much so, the Palladium concerts were a sellout. They were recorded for an album and a TV special. But what a lot of people didn't realise was that many of the royals quietly visited to watch the show. They were all big fans of Bing Crosby. And so, as a mark of respect, and no doubt possibly a sort of, shall we say, feeling of perhaps he'd done something not necessarily the correct thing, he made a huge donation from the concerts and the record sales of the album to the Duke of Edinburgh Awards. Very quietly, that I might point that out. It eventually was put onto some of the programmes, but not all of them. And according to a very well-placed source, Bing felt very badly about the exploitation of what could have been and of course his association with the former butler and his butler for some time. But it just goes to show, doesn't it, that in the fullness of time, the whole story can go a full circle. As you know, sadly, very quickly after doing that engagement at the London Palladium, Bing Crosby sadly passed away at only age 72, yes. And of course, the story's now lost in the midst of time. But now, thanks to you and I, it's popped back up. Neil Sean, Kensington, London.